Okay, we're back.
You're gonna have to start all the way.
No, no, not starting from zero.
Thanks,
Not starting from zero. Let's go back to that last
I
question.
look at it.
Let's go back to that last question. The majority, except for Mr. Salvat, felt that your parents had your best interest in mind. So, because they have your best interest in mind, you really don't need them to put that in writing. Because whether you feel it's fair or not, and in those days that you feel that your parents are being the most unfair people in the world, at the end, when time has passed, you have realized that their actions are based on their understanding of what's best for you. Because they love you, they have that relationship with you. And sometimes they're harsh, sometimes they tell you you can't go to Hawaii because you've been misbehaving and stuff like that. Yeah. But at the end, they let you go to Hawaii, right? They let you go to Hawaii because they've already bought the ticket. No, because they care for you. So you don't need those rights to be written down. You don't need those rights to be written down because you trust in them. But in this case, the colonists needed to have their rights written down. Why did they need to have their rights written down, Cecilia? I'll just make the case for it. Why did the colonists need to have their rights written down? Ceci, you do not know. Please tell me. Kind of, but there's a deeper reason for that. Ruben.
So they can have proof?
They have proof, but there is a deeper reason, yes. Because they didn't trust them. Because they were going to make decisions that were not in their best interest. So the colonists did not trust the government. And it wasn't anything that the government had done. This was a brand new, spanking brand new government. So it can't be something that this government had done. So if it can't be something that this government has done, why don't the colonists trust them? Eddie, why do you think that this government hasn't done anything bad to them? Because it's spanking brand new. So why don't the colonists trust them? There is a certain sense that something new might be scary, but that's not it. Yes?
Because in the other government, the national government didn't have much power, and this one did.
Well, you're right. Under the Articles of Confederation, didn't have that much power, but that was the lack of power was the fact that they didn't trust that government either. Yes? Why? Why do they have such mistrust? Ms. Valmana, why do you think that they're trying? Why are they distrustful of this government?
Because it's like new.
Well, it's new and we've already gone over and there's a certain sense of distrust for doing it, but I don't think that that's quite the reason. Ms. Lorenzo.
I think it's because they thought like if we're just gonna make the laws or whatever in their interest, not theirs.
Let me ask you a question, Ms. Lorenzo. Let's say that you go to a pound and you adopt a new dog. And that dog, every time you're going to go over to the dog, you've never met him, you've just adopted him, you haven't done anything wrong to the dog, but every time you're going to go up to the dog seems fearful. Why do you think that the dog is fearful?
Because of what's happened in the past?
Exactly. That's the reason why the colonists didn't trust the new government. Because their past experience with a different government had not been a good one. So therefore, they said, you know, we've already been mistreated. We are not going to be mistreated again. So now you have to prove to us that you're worthy of the trust, rather than we're going to give it to you blindly. Yes?
The government, was there still slavery?
At this time, there's still slavery.
So it was like we didn't go, like the rights only applied to
At this time, there's still slavery, and we the people did not mean the slaves or the Africans that were here as slaves. Did not mean them at this point. Later on it does, and it's tied in through the Gettysburg Address, where Lincoln finally says that. But let me stay on this straight and narrow. So, now we've got a reason for the amendments. Now we have a reason for the amendments to exist, a distrust. So, the first set of amendments, I think it was Ryan who said this the other day. The first set of amendments, which is amendment number 1, are all about what, Ryan?
Expression.
All about expression. And again, I have to congratulate you for that, because that's exactly what they're about. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of petition, and freedom of assembly are all methods of expressing ourselves. And the first thing that the colonists felt they had to worry about is that the government was going to quash their expression. Now, have we seen experiences with other governments where other governments have quashed the freedom of expression of its citizens?
Yes.
I'll give you a perfect story that happened today. Okay, today. CNN, the adult portion of CNN Student News, CNN today made the decision that it is no longer going to be in Russia. And part of the decision to leave Russia was because Russia was so controlling what the press was saying that they felt that they could no longer be an appropriate news source. There's a difference between an agency that calls themselves news and all they report is what the government tells them to report, and another one that reports what they feel is actual news. And CNN felt that Russia was so trying to control what their people were going to listen to that they could no longer be there. That's an example of freedom of expression being quashed by a government. Our government guarantees that sort of freedom of expression at the very beginning of our First Amendment, or Bill of Rights. Now, the other group of rights, we're going to jump a couple, but the other major group of rights that we find in the Bill of Rights are rights that relate to people who the government could abuse. Now, how does the government abuse people? The government abuses people through its law enforcement arm. Okay. Why? Because in certain situations, the government will go and arrest you and you disappear, and which is very common in many countries. There are countries where the government comes in the middle of the night, takes you away, and you disappear. Nobody ever hears from you again. Okay? That actually has happened and scares the people. So the government utilizing its police power scares the citizens a lot. And therefore, when you look at the Bill of Rights, which is 10 amendments, most of those amendments are focused on trying to protect those people who are going to be investigated, arrested, and tried for an accusation of a crime. Investigated, arrested, and tried, and after being tried, punished for an accusation of a crime. The majority of the rights in the Bill of Rights have to do with those. Yes?
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Trial with peers.
Okay, a trial with a jury of your peers.
Then you have the fair punishment.
Okay, it's not fair punishment. It's punishment that is not cruel and unusual, which is the 8th Amendment. The one that you mentioned is found in the 6th Amendment. Yes?
What would be considered cruel and unusual punishment?
That's a very good question, because it's difficult to apprehend that on one hand the states can impose the death penalty, and on the other hand they have to abide by a prohibition. Prohibition means that they can't do cruel and unusual. How is that not cruel and unusual? the Supreme Court has said that it is not. However, what the Supreme Court focuses is that cruel and unusual is punishment that induces torturous behavior. Okay? If you're being tortured, if you are being treated in that fashion, that's considered cruel and unusual. And sometimes the death penalty can be imposed in a torturous way. I'll give you an example that happened probably about 6 months to a year ago. And there was this gentleman that had committed a heinous crime. He had done something terrible. And the state had, in essence, sentenced him to the death penalty. And after years and years and years of trying to appeal, ultimately he had exhausted all the appeals. The sentence was going to be carried out. And when they strap him in, this was the death penalty that was going to be imposed by the method of lethal injection. There are several methods of the death penalty: electric chair, lethal injection, a gas, under certain circumstances, hanging. I don't think that any states accepts hanging in the United States today, but they used to. And under others, a firing squad where they shoot you. That's not something that happens within the states. I don't know if the military still utilizes firing squad. But in this case, it was going to be by lethal injection. The lethal injection, generally what is intended to do is, it's a variety of different drugs, but ultimately what they try to do is stop your heart from beating. How do they stop your heart from beating? Well, your heart is a muscle. So they inject you with massive quantities of muscle relaxant until the heart relaxes so much it stops beating. Well, this gentleman had been injected, and he, in essence, was struggling for 2 hours before he actually died. Okay? So in that situation, I believe that the Supreme Court would have found that the imposition of the death penalty there was cruel and unusual. And I also believe that all death penalty cases in that state were stopped until the state could prove that the death penalty could be administered without this sort of treatment to the person that ultimately is intended to die. So, but the lion's share of the Bill of Rights has to do with the rights that individuals who are investigated, accused, tried, and convicted and sentenced of a crime have. Now, popular belief, that generally means our parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, people in the street, generally will say something like this: why do criminals have so many rights? Well, and what I'd like to explain to them is that the United States has made a decision with regards to people who are arrested. And that decision answers that question of why do criminals have so many rights. The decision that the United States has made is that anybody arrested of a crime is innocent until proven guilty. So, is this person a criminal? No, not until they're proven guilty. So it is this person who has the bundle of rights. It's not the criminal. Even though a criminal, somebody convicted of a crime, criminal, does have a right against cruel and unusual punishment. All of the other bundles of rights are intended to protect this person who's presumed to be innocent. Now, there are other things in the Bill of Rights that we will touch upon. But lastly, number 10. One was freedom of expression. Number 10. Number 10, really, if you read it, you say, okay, and so what? Because when you read it at face value, it assumes something that you think is kind of common sense, and that is this. The states, right now we're talking about 50 states, the states and the people keep for themselves all of the rights and all the power